Welcome back to week 16. This is the second video out of 3. Week 16 is all about sales strategies. In the first video, we covered loss leaders and lead magnets. And in the third video, we're going to cover competitive analysis. But right now, video 2, we're going to talk about building a pricing strategy. So we covered this in a prior video in some detail. So some of this may be review. But what we really want to talk about is the different components that go into your pricing strategy. So some of the things we're going to think about are how do I build a pricing strategy? One, what is a pricing strategy? What are the components that go into it? How often should you review your pricing? How much margin should you be looking for on your product that you sell? And then we'll also look at just in general cost of goods for your pricing strategy and how they impact your pricing strategy, your COGS. All right. So if you remember, we talked about an 8-step strategy to look at for building your pricing strategy, with that first one being really understanding the buyer, which goes back to understanding your ideal customer, right? Back to week 2. And then we talked about surveying and talking to your customers, right? So whether that be people that are in your network who could be potential buyers and asking them what they would buy, or talking to people who have already bought from you and just kind of surveying them on their feelings around the pricing and the value that they're getting for the price that they paid. Then it's your competitive analysis, which we're going to really dig into deeply in the next video, but really understanding your competition, what they offer, what their price is, why they offer the price they offer, and, really like what goes into their product and or service, and how do they differentiate themselves in the market. So competitive analysis is very important when you're selling. Then market analysis, which is, is there a need for what you want to sell in the market? Are people looking for another alternative? Will what you're selling, whether it be a product or a service, will you be able to sell it? And what price are people willing to pay for it? You also want to consider in this area very heavily thinking about your brand and brand recognition, and how much is it going to cost you to sell your product and or service. So if you're not very well known, you may have to spend more money on advertising, and that's definitely going to impact your overall price that you want to use to go into the market with, because it could minimize your margin quite a bit. Fine. Then next, step 5 is analyzing the data that you've collected and then determining a price, right? So we talked about prices ending in specific numbers, psychological buying for people. That's huge in pricing. But more than that, you have to make sure that your cost is covered on what it costs you to produce the product, or what it costs you on the service, right? So you have to understand the value of your time. So many people do not understand the value of their time. So you really need to understand value of time, and you need to understand what goes into creating your product and or service, right? Because you don't want to be losing money on it. So you need to do an analysis, and in this, you're considering, how you're selling it, how you're distributing it, all the costs that go into it. If somebody else is manufacturing it for you and storing it for you, those costs, the costs of the raw materials, the cost of your time, if you're involved in it. And then if you're having to pay out employees or subcontractors for work, all of that gets considered when you think about the analysis piece of this, and then determining the price from there, right? So you don't want to end up where you're priced too low, and sure, people may buy it, but you're losing money on every sale that you make. You don't want to make your business a loss leader. You really, really don't. Then how you communicate value is step 6. Remember that when we talked about that earlier. And it's not that, hey, I'm valuable. Excuse me. It is the act of demonstrating value. This could be through client testimonials that are on your website or on social media. It could be the description and the story that you tell with the product. It could be the conversations that you have during the sales cycle, where people realize like, oh, wow, this is a really great product or service. This person really knows what they're doing, or this company is very, very committed to helping their customers succeed, whatever that story is, right? So you need to be able to communicate value, and then you want to focus on exceptional customer service. You want the customer experience to be top notch because one, they're going to want to come back. People will pay for a top notch customer experience, and people will tell everybody about a top-notch customer experience. So you really want to be able to deliver that. And then you want to collect testimonials. All of those things are part of your pricing strategy. Now, what's key on your pricing strategy is also understanding the cost of goods. So what does it cost you in raw materials and or time to create the product and or service that you are selling, right? So Corey and I created Foundation 52, and you're watching that product, this course right now, but we had to sit down and say, what's it going to cost us in terms of time to create this product? And then how many of the products do we have to sell just to recoup the cost of time to make it? We have very few other costs that go into it in terms of, the hosting for Kajabi where you're watching it is one of them. But there aren't a lot of other things that expenses with this particular product. This course it's kind of self-standing. So create everything and then we can sell it. So we have to figure out what's the price point. And remember, if you bought this, then you already know that one of the things that we had two guiding principles while creating this particular product. The first one being, it absolutely positively needs to be packed with value, and it needs to be at a price point that any small business owner can afford it. Those were our two things that we were very insistent upon while we were creating this product. So we knew going in, this is how long it's going to take us to create it, given all the PDFs, creating the outlines, figuring out the curriculum, figuring out how we were going to host it, how we're going to line it up, right? So there's a lot of back-end logistical things for it. Then there was creating all the content, creating all the videos, editing all the videos, creating all of the audio files, editing all the audio files, listening to all the audio files, setting everything up on Kajabi. So we knew once we really looked at it, what it was going to take us to do it. And then we know how many we have to sell just to recoup our cost, our investment cost of making it. That's really what you need to do when you're looking at a product or a service. You need to think about all the inputs, how much it cost, and then think about in the margin that you're trying to make. And, margin is such a funny thing because there are some industries where margin can be just unbelievably high and others where it's unbelievably low. Example, Corey and I both used to work for a food service company, and you're talking pennies. Margin was pennies. You could sell a case of green beans and make like 12 cents. So you got to move a lot of cases to make some good money. Then we also had a client who sold high-end luxury watches. They resold them. The margins on those were stupid. I'm talking like 60, 70, 80%. They were crazy. So you sell two watches and you've made enough commission, you've made enough money off commission that you didn't have to sell anything for another 4 months. True story. And two very different industries with margins being very different. So look at where you need to be, what's reasonable, right? So if you have a course and it costs you $500 to make the course and you're going to sell it for $27, you need to figure out how many you need to sell just to break even. And then how many you're going to continue to sell, you're going to push, because all of that then becomes, with the exception of maintenance fees, maintenance for, the system wherever you're hosting it. That's all gravy. So that's what you need to think about when you're thinking about your pricing strategy. Break even, cost to make it, margin. And then also consider the psychology of where you want to price it, what your competition's doing, what the market will allow. Make sure you're understanding your buyer. All right, that's it for video 2. Video 3 is coming up, and that's going to be on competitive analysis. So looking forward to that one. See you in a few minutes.